Hey everyone, this is Anton Pelcher. I'm an engineer and I have been constructing fish farms for more than 10 years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the 10 most common misconceptions and myths about setting up a fish farm. Now, we're going to analyze them step by step. Be sure to watch this video to the end, as we're going to analyze the king of all myths. Is it even profitable to grow fish in RAS, or there is no sense to do that at all? Let's go! Myth number 1. The fish farmed in RAS smells like mud. The first myth is that the fish farmed in RAS smells like mud. To be honest, this is partly true. It smells like mud only if it was not sustained before the sale, because the fish must be kept in clean running water without feeding for 5 to 7 days. If you have made it, and this is necessary by the process, then your fish will have excellent qualities, as well as taste and smell. Well, there are farmers, to be honest, who neglect this rule, and they lose their customers because the fish is no longer tasty and often really smells of mud. Do not make the same mistake. Myth number 2. High costs for heating and electricity. And the second common myth, which is a misconception, is the high cost of heating. Well, let's take a look at the electricity. I have met dozens, if not hundreds, of clients who said the heating costs must be quite high to maintain all this built-in. Let's just count the numbers. You need 5 to 7 kilowatts of electricity and about 1 cubic meter of gas to grow 1 kilogram of sturgeon. Let's convert this into money. So the maximum price for electricity is 0.1 USD per 1 kilowatt. Then let's multiply it by 7 and it makes 0.7 USD. And the gas is another 0.13 USD. In total, it makes 0.83 USD. So it makes a cost of electricity and heating. Well, at large, this is all that distinguishes an open farm from RAS. These costs of electricity and heating are the maximum, and it's all that is required for growing sturgeon. But for example, there is such fish as African catfish, due to the fact that it does not require oxygen and is contained at very high densities, and also grows. It needs only 1 to 2 kilowatt of electricity to gain 1 kilogram, and a maximum of 0.5 cubic meters of gas. Therefore, the cost of electricity and heating is no more than 0.27 USD per kilogram. Is it much or little? I think this is quite a little, because 70% of all costs include feed, of course. Imagine that 1.18 to 2.08 USD is for African catfish, and up to 2.78 USD per kilogram for sturgeon is only feed. So your main cost that you need to work with is not heating or even electricity, but feed. And if you are interested in growing African catfish and you haven't watched my channel yet, there are a lot of videos dedicated to this wonderful fish. Be sure to follow the links and watch. Let's continue. The third myth. The fish farmed in RAS is non-natural. What is meant by non-natural? If you mean farm-raised fish, then of course yes. But let's face it, everything you see in stores now is all grown. It turns out that everything is non-natural if it's not grown in wild nature. Every year, the number of wild fish and wild animals is decreasing, and the whole world is switching to farming. It includes farming of poultry, pigs and cattle, and similarly the fish. If you mean non-natural, comparing it with an open farmed fish, that is, with fish grown in ponds, hatcheries, and some other open reservoirs, then let's also look at and analyze this situation. Feed. RAS fish is fed with the same feeds that trout in Karelia, as well as salmon in Norway and any other fish. This feed is specifically made for the same type of fish produced by the same manufacturers, that is, the structure of the meat is exactly the same. But as for open systems, there are hatcheries and ponds with parasites. They are constantly on the fish and inside of it. Any heavy metals can get into the reservoir. Often, if you keep fish in high densities, then you need to use antibiotics so that the fish is treated from potential parasites. For example, in Norway there are problems with sea lice and other parasites. farmers often have to catch this fish, expose it to the special baths with antiseptic and antibiotic, and release it back. Well, what do you think of non-artificial fish now? Is it the fish that is treated with antibiotics, which has potential parasites and which is located in reservoirs into which some heavy metals from the plant could be dumped? Or is it the fish that is kept in absolutely clean conditions, with constant disinfection, without parasites, fed with the same natural feeds, grown in subterranean water, without any tasty stuff? If you also thought that fish caught in the wild is better than farmed fish or is healthier, and so on, you are probably wrong. Well, I've told you a little bit about it. Hit thumbs up button and let's continue. Myth number 4. Expensive maintenance of the equipment. Okay, let's move on. Expensive maintenance of the equipment. Well, it's probably logical to think that there is a lot of different equipment on this farm and it constantly requires maintenance and money like an old Mercedes. But let's look at this issue in more detail. What is maintained in RAS? There are 3 things. The first is the drum filter mesh. The main nodes are equipped with drum filters and you'll need to change the mesh. Practically, it's a very simple procedure, so you can do it yourself. The mesh is inexpensive. It can be repaired and replaced pretty easily. The second is ultraviolet lamps. A large number of farms are equipped with ultraviolet lamps, and the lamps need to be replaced. Basically, each lamp needs to be replaced on average once a year. So keep in mind that once a year you will need to change them. This is probably 5% of the cost of the entire ultraviolet system, or 10% at maximum. Make sure you are prepared for the costs. And the last thing is an oxygen generator. This is probably the equipment that is most expensive to maintain, if it's an industrial generator. Its maintenance costs $1,300 to $2,800 per year, so that you understand. If you have a large farm and a full-fledged oxygen generator, you'll have to maintain it. Well, it's not you who will do that, but a specialized company. For example, the company replaces solenoid valve once every 5 years, and also some other procedures. But basically, an oxygen generator is not always used, or there could be a simple and cheap concentrator. Ultraviolet is also not always worth it. There is an ozone generator that doesn't require maintenance. By the way, I prefer ozone generators. It turns out that you only have a drum filter mesh left. All these procedures are less than 1% of the total cost of the farm per year. So we have just ruined the myth that the maintenance of RAS is expensive. Myth number 5. It's unprofitable to grow fish in RAS. Okay, let's move on. It's unprofitable to grow fish in RAS. That is, in general, this business is unprofitable. Well, to be honest, it's possible to make any business either profitable or unprofitable. For example, in what cases will the fish farming in RAS be unprofitable? Let's take a closer look. Firstly, if you want to farm cheap types of fish and grow them for sale, for example, carp, crushing carp, white amu carp, silver carp, anything that costs $1.4 to $2.8 per kilogram, most likely the cost of feed will simply exceed your selling price. Therefore, indeed, the farming of cheap fish species in RAS, with the exception of African catfish, is fully cost-effective. But if you farm fry the same fish species and then release them into the pond, it will greatly improve the economy of your open farm. The next point, if you want to organize a small farm, that is, if you want to put 2 or 3 fish holding tanks and earn something from it. Most likely you will spend time on this, but there will be not real profit, because the volume of fish is small and the costs of promoting and selling these products are approximately the same. Therefore, a small farm may also not be profitable if it's too small. The next type of farm has about 5 tons per year and a full-time staff. I don't know, let it be the CEO, marketing director, commercial director, executive director, chief fish farmer, deputy chief fish farmer. Well, of course, I'm just kidding. But sometimes there are situations when our clients want to put a small farm that needs to be maintained by themselves, so that it's profitable, or hire one employee at maximum. Then they employ a full-fledged staff there, as it's usually done in a serious large company. Then yes, this business will really be unprofitable, because they will spend the large share of money on staff. Well, the last option when the company can be unprofitable is dumping, and entrepreneurs often make such a mistake. First category is those who can't sell their fish and start selling it for a knockdown price. At least they just need to change their approach, probably in marketing. That is, they begin to drop the market, sell fish cheaper than the minimum price, so they themselves do not turn, not do others. And the second option, that is, those who calculate the farm according to the most negative scenario and also deduct 30% of the profit or 50% from there. If you are going to grow sturgeon and sell it for 5-6 USD, it's better not to take up this venture right away, because the normal market price of sturgeon is 9 USD in wholesale and 11 to 14 in retail. Count on market prices and not on greatly underestimated ones, then your economy will be good. And by the way, I have a special bonus for you. Practically, there are a lot of details in the calculation of the farm economy. So you can leave a comment below, write your name, your region, the fish you want to grow, and the annual capacity. Then we will calculate together in relation to your specific situation and your region rate, how profitable or non-profitable it will be to grow exactly the fish that you want in your area. Myth number 6. I won't be able to sell the fish. The next misconception is that I won't be able to sell fish. Well, it's really normal to think about where to sell your fish in general, but the cases that I have encountered when people couldn't sell their fish are basically divided into several categories. The first category is if a person builds a farm somewhere in the middle of nowhere and there are no normal large settlements within a radius of 100 to 200 kilometers. That is, you don't have a normal population around that could eat your fish, especially if it's premium fish. Then of course there are fewer buyers for it than for cheap fish. So this is the first situation. The second thing, I don't do anything to sell fish. That is, I don't understand how to sell it. If you have grown the most beautiful fish and it has a wonderful taste, everything is fine with it. But at the same time you are not engaged in marketing or started doing it too late, then of course you will have problems. So here is a recommendation right away. Start thinking about marketing even before the construction of the farm, and work it out when you have fry. And here comes the third situation in which you can sell your fish. It happens if you decide to start with some exotic fish. Well, for example, many people who are familiar with the subject know that farmers try to grow barramundi in the Yaroslavl region of Russia. In fact, it is an Asian sea bass, such a specific fish that you are not going to find in a supermarket. Actually, you won't find it almost anywhere. The fish is wonderful in its taste. People love it in Asia, but people in Russia don't know it at all. What do you think of the result of this experiment? Naturally, this project was closed. I don't know where the fish was sold and it was actually grown, but in the end the project was closed and switched to the more simple fish that is easier to work with. Myth number 7. Something's going to be wrong. Now it's myth number 7. Something's going to be wrong. Let's figure it out. Basically, we use production equipment and live fish. Indeed, there are things that can go wrong, but they can only go wrong for certain reasons. Basically, there are two of them. The first reason is wrong design. That is, there are mistakes made during the design and preparation of this business. The cleaning system is not designed the way, duplications are not set, somewhere something is not laid down or not thought of. Yes, you start the system, you start growing fish, and that's when something goes wrong. And the second reason is maintenance. You still need to understand that if this is a more or less large farm, then you'll have to have at least some kind of team that could react in case of some emergency and fix the problem. If you have only a security guard on your farm, for example, who has no idea which valves to open or close and which buttons to press if something goes wrong, of course he will not be able to do anything about it. He will either have to wait for you, or he won't be able to get through to you, and then some unpleasant thing will happen. Therefore, if you have approached the design and planning out this business correctly, if you have learned this yourself or hired a good team, well, the risk still remains. I will not say that it's impossible, but the risk is as minimal as in any other business, as in any other production. Myth number 8. I won't find any employees. And the 8th misconception is that I will not find employees. Let's look at it in more detail. In general, what kind of employees are required on the farm and why, and how it can happen that you will not find them. Basically, on any fish farm, the most important person, in addition to the owner of this farm, is the chief fish farmer. It can be you, if it's a small farm, or it can be hired specialist. Often this specialist is simply invited from another region. If you are building a medium or large farm, if it's a full-fledged business, then of course you will need a chief fish farmer. He will assist to ensure all fish growth processes. That is, he will be responsible for the whole process. If you want to find the chief fish farmer, of course, you won't find him just right away. But we live in the 21st century. There is internet and a bunch of CVs. So, you can safely select a chief fish farmer according to your own criteria. But it's you who should be the very first employee and the most competent one if you are going to get deep into this business. Because you need to evaluate the competence of the employees who will stand behind you. Or you need to hire a good manager who will do it for you if you want to act only as an investor. What else is needed on the farm? In fact, in addition to the main fish farmer, yes, there is also an engineering component, and an engineer is necessarily present on large farms. But in fact, it's a water treatment engineer. He doesn't necessarily have to be an engineer with RAS experience. He just has to be a technician whom you, or those who produce and supply you with this process line, will teach you how to properly maintain the equipment. He will deal with it himself and will be fully responsible for all the equipment and hardware that you have on the farm. That is, there is a chief fish farmer who is responsible for the fish, there is an engineer who is responsible for equipment and machinery, and there are only line staff under. So, if it's a small farm, then there is essentially no one here at all, 1 or 2 persons at least. If this is an average farm, then there are, for example, 4 operators who replace each other. They can be hired in the local area. Experience is not necessary. They can simply be taught to watch the fish, monitor the equipment, and normally be on duty at night and keep a log. If it's a large farm, then it's some kind of mechanic, plumber, electrician, perhaps it's 1 person, perhaps 2 or 3 people. So, these are the people who will be able to repair and maintain any equipment that you have on the farm at any time. Myth number 9. It's necessary to devote a lot of time to the farm. And the 9th misconception is that a lot of time will have to be devoted to a fishing farm. That is, for example, you have your own business. You want to start a fish farm, but you think that you will devote too much time to this, and you will just have to live there. I'll be honest, if you organize this farm correctly, then you won't have to live there. You won't even have to be there a lot. You just need someone who will monitor this farm if you don't want to do it yourself. Preferably, you need someone who will set up a small advertisement for you and will sell fish. That is, a seller if you don't want to be a seller yourself. Many farmers run a farm personally and sell fish by themselves. There is nothing to worry about if the farm is small. It's like your self-employment. If you want to hire employees, then there is someone who is responsible for operation. There is someone who is responsible for sales, and then you will only have to manage. Well, if we are talking about a serious business and an industrial farm, then of course a full-time team has to be there. It includes chief fish farmer, chief engineer, operators, and sales department. Perhaps if you run in a really large farm, there has to be some kind of manager and you act as the owner of this business. And you have to check this business for financial indicators, for the entire economy, for how the staff works, and how the manager monitors it. In general, it's all that simple as with any other business. Myth number 10. Difficulties with the purchasing of fry and feed. Well, the last misconception is the difficulties with the purchasing of raw materials, that is, fry and feed. Okay, let's deal with these issues, and I'm going to start with the fry. It depends on which region you live in. If it's about more or less traditional types of fish for growing in RAS, it can be sturgeon, trout, African catfish. So in those regions where a particular type of fish is traditionally farmed, you will find fry without problems almost at any time of the year. If it's about the fertilized eggs, then it's even easier. Yes, things are a little bit more complicated if you are located in some faraway regions with low population density. But still in most regions, in most places, there are trout, sturgeon farms, African catfish farms that are engaged in farming fry, that is, you can almost always buy fry there. In this case, I recommend you to look for fertilized eggs. How does it work? You set up an additional hatchery and fry department and you are no longer buying fry, which requires large machines, live containers for transportation, but you are buying fertilized eggs. It can be placed in a handbag or a thermal container if you need to transport it by plane. Then you place it into incubators and then you'll get your own fry. By the way, you can also sell this fry then. I think that we have sorted out the fry. I would like to emphasize once again that in most 90% of cases, it's not difficult to purchase it when you need it. Let's move on to the feed. In this case, it's even easier. Practically, in any country, there are representative offices of well-known world feed producers that supply feed for any type of fish. But this case concerns only the main types of fish aside of the exotic ones. Similarly, you can surely choose one of local producers who will supply you with feed. Sometimes it's out of stock. That is very often many farmers work with local producers. Well, and let's figure out the most important thing in the end. Is it profitable to use RAS and should you try this business? I will not advise you, but I will tell you about the facts. If those 10 items that I told you about earlier are organized correctly and competently, then your production and your enterprise will definitely be profitable. If you make serious mistakes in some of the points that we just talked about, then production can really suffer losses. And such cases have happened across the country. In any business, there are successful cases and unsuccessful ones as well. I'll tell you honestly, there are much more successful cases if an entrepreneur approaches this correctly, competently, thinks through this business. If you want to get some additional information about this, you can leave comments below. I will try to prepare information for you on economy and operation of RAS. Well, today we have analyzed 10 misconceptions of growing fish using RAS. I tried to go through all of them and raised this topic in general about how profitable is this fish farming in closed fish farms. My name is Anton Pelcher. Hit thumbs up button and subscribe. We grow fish and earn good money from it.